All right, so welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for the 9th edition of the Fireside Chat. My name is Garrett McLaughlin. For those of you who are new to this series, the Fireside Chat is a conversational webinar where we connect with some of the top professionals in the endurance community. This week, we have Jill Merkel, who is a sports and women's wellness dietitian in Nashville, Tennessee. Before we get started, let me cover a few quick housekeeping items. So do me a favor and silence any technology around you. A lot of great information in the Fireside Chat today, so I want to make sure you get the most from that. Second, I highly recommend asking questions. Of course, there'll be specific items that we'll cover during the chat as was outlined in the registration, but you're welcome to ask any question at any time. So somewhere on your screen, depending on in the computer, iPad, or cell phone, you should see a button that you can click a chat button. Feel free to input a question in there now or at some point throughout the chat. Lastly, if you cannot stay for the entire chat for whatever reason, or you just want to reflect back on this content at a later time, I will be sending the replay of this to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So make sure you check your email and especially the spam folder, since it can quite often end up in there. Now, without further ado, Jill, thank you for joining us on the Fireside Chat. How are things going down in Nashville today?
Going well. Thank you for having me.
That's good. You guys been having, I guess not even summer yet, but how's the weather been? Pretty warm or fairly?
Yes. So I moved to a new apartment on Saturday and it was a sweat fest. It was very hot and humid. Today it's nicer. It's like 84 and lower humidity, but yeah, the weekend was rough.
Right. And that's one thing I don't miss, just the heat and the humidity from April all the way until like October. It was just brutal after a while. So to get us started here, do me a favor and just give us a little introduction. Tell people about you, where you're from, what do you do, what type of services you provide, just so they can get a sense of you and your background.
Absolutely. So my name is Jill Merkel. I'm a registered dietitian located in Nashville, Tennessee, but I see clients virtually, so you don't have to be in Nashville to work with me. I specialize in sports nutrition, so helping athletes and active individuals fuel their body properly for performance, for recovery. And then I also do a lot of work, I call it women's wellness, a lot of disordered eating, chronic dieting, underfueling. I use an intuitive eating, anti-diet approach to my counseling and helping women to make peace with food and again, fuel their body properly, which is kind of what we're going to talk about today. Because that kind of came from the sports nutrition piece. Like I started out being a sports dietitian, but within that, I kept getting women in particular coming to me for sports nutrition help. But there were a lot of more underlying issues around food, chronically underfueling, whether intentionally or unintentionally, just because of the diet culture that we live in. So that kind of grew out of that. So a lot of my clients are kind of an intersection of both, athletes, active individuals, and then, if they do struggle with the chronic dieting, with the disordered eating, body image piece, there's a lot of crossover between those two.
Awesome. And so for everyone here, our topic today, relative energy deficiency in sport. And I've been trying to look through a lot of research and stuff like that. I know the International Olympic Committee can consensus statements and updates to that just to make sure we're kind of expanding the knowledge. But I was very interested on this topic just because a lot of the people that I deal with, we're looking at performance in injuries specifically. So understanding kind of how that nutritional piece can fit in there. And then as you start to go down the hole here and looking at RED specifically, you start to see that it's not just endurance athletes. I mean, normal people, and not just performance and injuries, but a whole slew of issues can be created through here. So if you can, to get us started, tell us a little bit about, from a nutritional standpoint, how do we actually know if we are fueling properly? And then we'll kind of get in, for those of you on here, we'll get into how do you define REDs and exactly what does that entail?
Yeah. So essentially starting out, and you can click to the next slide, athletes and active individuals can easily underestimate how many calories they actually need. So sometimes people are like, I feel like I'm eating a lot, or I feel like I'm eating all the time, and it still might not be enough. Maybe it's still that diet mentality of always choosing the lower calorie food. Maybe it's filling up on, vegetables, foods that are bulky, that provide a lot of fiber or water content, but not necessarily enough calories. Maybe it's just not eating enough of a certain food group, not getting enough carbs or protein or fat. And so it can really be intentional or unintentional. Someone's trying to diet, someone's trying to lose weight, trying to cut back, or it may just be like you don't know how much you need. A lot of times people are just shocked, I think, by the amount of food I tell them that they need if they're active, if they're an athlete, even if they're not. I mean, this idea of 1,200 calories for women is crazy. That's like what a 4-year-old needs.
Mhm.
So a lot of people are just chronically under eating and under fueling their body. And I think that the signs of reds, which we're going to go into, can be really subtle at first, because we do live in a culture where it's very praised to like eat less and to lose weight. And so it can be easy to kind of not even realize that some of the habits that you're used to are considered disordered eating, ignoring hunger or not fueling after a hard workout, like not listening to your body.
Mhm. And so talking about understanding if you're fueling properly, it seemed like as I looked through some of like the research and the consensus statement here, it seems like it's somewhat challenging to understand exactly how much you need. So is there a way that you recommend for your clients to kind of understand what is just that total caloric amount they need for their activity, and how does that change? I mean, we have short runs, we have long runs, we have ultra marathons, we have 5K runners. Like, how does that change based on their training, and how do you just really understand where you fit into that?
Yeah. So I definitely recommend, working with a professional, working with a registered dietitian who can give you customized, individualized recommendations. Because again, my fitness pal, for instance, like 1,200 is like the go-to number. If you put in, especially that you're a woman and you're trying to lose weight, it's like 1,200 calories for everyone. And it's just not enough.
Mhm.
So really taking into account, activity level for sure. I kind of like to zoom out. I think it gets very challenging for people if, say they're training for a marathon and it's like shorter runs during the week, longer run on the weekend. If we're trying to say like, here's what I need to eat Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Saturday, Sunday look different, that can be challenging. And so I like to look at like, what's our activity level for the week and give you kind of like a baseline. Maybe here's the average that we're shooting for. Maybe you're going to need more, leading up to the long run on Saturday. Maybe it's on Sunday that you need more. Maybe that's your rest day. But a lot of times, especially intense exercise, can make us feel not as hungry. So saying that you need more on a hard workout day, sometimes that doesn't work for people because they don't feel hungry. But then maybe the next day it's a rest day and they're like, "Ooh, I am so hungry, but it's a rest day. I'm not supposed to eat as much." I'm like, "No, you still need to. The body doesn't reset itself every 24 hours." So taking into account kind of the overall, how active are you just in your everyday living? What's your, excuse me, activity level like? Taking into account food preferences, schedule, like how often do you like to eat? There's just so much that goes into why we choose the foods that we do. So I think it needs to really be an individualized, customized approach to nutrition.
Okay, awesome, awesome. And so, in terms of gadgets today, I know Garmin and Fitbit and all of these other things, Apple Watch. Do you typically see? You talked about the 1,200 calories for MyFitnessPal. Do you typically see discrepancies across most of these technologies now, or are there any that you've seen that are better than other? Just to give people an idea. Okay, this one actually works pretty well in predicting calories and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit different if, like a Garmin or something is tracking like your calories that you're expending during the day. And then you're kind of taking that into account with your nutrition goals. Like that's different than like you're putting in your height and your weight and your activity level, and it's telling you this is how many calories you need to eat. So like in general, I'll use like an activity factor. There's different equations to use based on if someone's very active, moderately low activity. But then if someone is tracking like with a Garmin or something, I can kind of compare that number like, okay, it's saying that you're, expending this many calories on a long run day. How does that compare to the activity factor that we're using?
Awesome. That's great to know. And so in terms of reds, could you just define that for us, and just we'll kind of start to dig into that a little bit more here.
Absolutely. So it stands for relative energy deficiency in sport. I think there's some talk about even taking away the S because it doesn't necessarily have to be in sport. It doesn't necessarily have to be an athlete. Happens a lot in individuals who are moving their body essentially in some way. And it was previously known as the female athlete triad, which really focused on those three main factors: the weight loss, the loss of the menstrual cycle, and then bone injuries. But it's since been expanded upon and renamed because it affects so much more than just those three components. And it includes males. So the female athlete triad, kind of made people think like this doesn't happen in men, but men can absolutely be underfueling and experience the negative effects of underfueling. So essentially that's what we're talking about. When an individual is not consuming enough calories to adequately sustain what they need just in a daily basis. So daily energy expenditure, exercise demands. Again, this can be intentional or unintentional, possibly overtraining, underfueling, a combination of both. There's just, some mismatch between how much energy is going in and how much energy is going out.
Okay. And then, I mean, I was just fascinated by, look at the health consequences. We don't just think, like I said before, from my standpoint, injuries and performance. I mean, this is something that could really affect the entire body in so many different ways. Can you just expand on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so many different ways, so many effects of underfueling. And I think that, again, just the society that we live in, there's a lot of talk about, don't eat too much, people are eating too much, and that it doesn't get talked about enough that the consequences of underfueling are more dramatic and more like consequential, because essentially you're fighting against your body's desire to stay alive. If we're not getting enough food, energy is necessary for just survival. And so it can really affect the whole body. Essentially, one dietitian that I know, she describes it as like, how much money do you have in the bank? If you don't have enough money to pay all the bills, some of the bills have to go on the back burner. You have to decide, where am I going to put the money? And so kind of the same thing, your body is like, okay, I don't have enough energy to cover all the things that are going on in the body. So I'm going to prioritize. I'm going to make sure that, the heart and the brain and the lungs, things that are necessary for being alive, are going to get the adequate energy. But maybe that doesn't leave enough energy for the GI system. So we can get digestive issues like bloating and constipation and, feeling like sometimes people can just feel like really uncomfortable after eating because the GI system has like slowed down. It's not used to having food coming in. For women, it can really affect the menstrual cycle because, again, the body's like, hey, that's not necessary for survival. So let's go ahead and take money away from that, energy away from that. So that can look like, irregular menstrual cycle, or it can even go away when a female's not having their menstrual cycle. I'm afraid that definitely in the past, but even kind of now, that's often thought of as just a normal thing that happens for female athletes, but it's really not. It's a sign that the body's not getting the adequate energy and nutrition that it needs. And so it can also affect, the immune system if we're getting injured often, getting sick often. Again, the GI system, cardiovascular system, the heart is a muscle, so it needs energy just like all the other muscles. Psychological, moodiness, sluggishness, anxiety, depression. The brain takes a lot of energy. It surprises people like how many calories, how many carbohydrates, how much fat the brain itself needs. So when we're really trying to stick to that insanely low calorie or low fat or low carb diet, like that really impacts the brain. And then it can really affect growth and development if this is occurring, in younger athletes and active individuals. It can really impact them long term because we're building and growing our bone health, when we are younger. And so that can affect you for the rest of your life if you didn't consume enough nutrition in order to build the body's bone structure. Mm-hmm. So that can lead to future injuries, in the bones. So lots of effects of underfueling.
So when I look at all these different areas too, I think of, and I probably know someone that has something going on in one of those areas, and I think we're so quick with the medical system to prescribe some type of medication, but almost completely neglect nutrition. Do you ever see, like in your experience, are doctors doing a good job or a better job than they used to getting people to look at nutrition to figure out, okay, could this potentially be a nutrition issue, or is that just is there a big disconnect there?
Yeah, I would say there's still a pretty big disconnect. For instance, if someone has these GI symptoms, a lot of times the initial go-to is to cut out more foods, right? It must be something's bothering my stomach. So I'm going to cut out gluten, or I'm going to cut out dairy, or I'm going to cut out, whatever food. And so it's actually making the problem worse because now we're restricting more. It might be creating more fear of food, just limiting our body more, not getting enough energy. And then even from like the athlete side of things, I recently had a high school swimmer come to me who was just, to me, clearly not eating enough, and just was having really poor performance. Like he just was starting to slow down. He was having muscle cramps. And I think the mom like told the coaches that they were going to see me, and the coaches are like, no, it's not a nutrition thing. And I mean, just after 2 weeks of eating more carbohydrates in particular, which is the fuel source for the muscles, like even the coaches were like, oh my gosh, like he's performing so much better. The kid reported feeling better, like more energy. They were all like, I had no idea that nutrition would have this much of an impact, but it really does.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because as I looked through this consensus statement, I think they said that looking at, there was 900 doctors, 33% of them, only 33% were aware of Red S, and only 50% of those that were aware of it were comfortable actually treating it. So I think for a lot of people that are on here listening to this right now, I think we need to challenge things a little bit more and explore our options, and don't necessarily go one direction or other, but talk to other providers and professionals just to make sure you guys are getting well cared for. Because I think a lot can be missed here, and a lot of people, from what I see, quickly overlook nutrition when that's kind of what's going to actually make us healthy on a cellular level. So we really need to look at that a little bit more. Now, from a performance standpoint, what are some of the things you'll typically see as we start to go down the spectrum of Red S that some athletes, or just, regular people might tend to deal with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, if they're getting injured often, if they're getting recurring injuries, if they, are getting sick often, if they're not seeing the performance or the training outcomes that you would expect from if they were, following like a consistent tailored training plan, and, not seeing the response that you would expect. So I often describe, I say like the workout itself is breaking the body down. Like you're not getting stronger and you're not getting faster and all these things from just the workout. It's the workout combined with the nutrition, because otherwise we're just continuously breaking the body down. It's the nutrition that builds the body back up, that helps to build that strength. And so oftentimes, if we're not doing both, we're not even getting the most out of our workouts. So really looking at that pre and post workout nutrition, again, it can affect our mental aspect, from like mood swings to like brain fog, not being able to concentrate, depression, anxiety, and just being, depending on the sport, impaired judgment, just being able to not react as quickly or not think as fast on our feet. Because again, the brain needs a lot of energy, and if it's not getting enough, it can't do its job properly.
Mm-hmm. And so what are some of those early warning signs that, again, you might see if someone's is starting to develop this?
Yeah, so definitely just looking at overall energy levels. If someone's feeling really run down, if they feel like they're, not recovering well from their workouts, maybe they feel more sore than they expect, or the soreness hangs around longer than they would expect. Again, those injuries and illness, if that's happening. For females, the menstrual cycle irregularities are a huge red flag. Preoccupation with food. So when we're not eating enough, we become obsessed with food, essentially. There's a lot of studies where you literally become obsessed with food. If you're not eating enough, it's like all you can think about. If you've ever been hangry, I've been hangry before, and I'm like, no one talk to me, I need food now. So that's definitely a clear sign that you might not be eating enough if you're thinking about food a lot. It can even impact your sleep. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you're hungry, or you're just not sleeping well and you used to sleep well, looking at, are there things that have changed? Did I increase my activity level and not increase my nutrition along with it? I think also the fear of food, that restrictive mindset of maybe carbs are bad. I need to limit this food. I didn't work out today, so I need to eat less. Those can definitely be warning signs that we're starting to get into this disordered eating mindset. Again, those digestive issues, I think too often it's still just, well, it must be a food that's causing it, but really it could just be chronically underfueling. And so the GI system's just not working as well as it could. Difficulty taking rest or recovery days, so that over-exercising, having a hard time missing a workout, even taking a planned recovery day, feeling like you always have to do something. And then low body weight or low body fat can be a warning sign, but it's important to know that someone doesn't have to be at a low body weight in order to experience REDS. So it can happen in people regardless of size, age, or activity level. So it's not just, the super thin runner who you're looking at like maybe they need to eat more. It can happen in all different shapes and sizes.
And so do any of these happen first? Like if we look at as we start to develop RED-S, this is kind of your stage 1 symptom, stage 2, stage 3 to show you kind of how far along you are, or can it really be anywhere and anything at any time?
Yeah, there's really no here's what's going to happen. Certainly some of the signs are going to be earlier warning signs, like you may notice low energy or not recovering from workouts before you get to the point of like your menstrual cycle is thrown off. But for other people, just cutting back on calories a little bit can throw off the menstrual cycle. So it really depends on the person. And I think it depends on, again, if it's intentional, like I'm trying to lose weight, I'm trying to cut back, I'm trying to restrict, or if it's unintentional, that if it's unintentional, you might not have that fear of food or that restrictive mindset. You might just not be making the time or eating enough of the, high calorie foods in order to get the energy that you need.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then tell me a little bit about this quote that you placed in here.
Yeah, so this is from, she's a former professional runner, Lauren Fleshman, and she wrote a letter to her younger self about what she wished that she would have known and done differently. So she says, depending on the methods that you use to fight your body, you may end up destroying your relationship with food and sport for years to come. So I think this is truly powerful. It's a really powerful article, this letter that she wrote to herself, especially for young athletes to read, because I think it's still so common to, for athletes to just think that is a good thing for me to just keep pushing, to just keep fighting against my body. This might hurt or this doesn't feel good, but that's part of being an athlete. I'm just going to push through. So I think sometimes reading these real life experiences can help people to see just how detrimental it can be to your long-term health and your long-term ability to remain in your sport. There was another one, elite runner Mary Kane shared her story that her coaching program was emotionally and physically abusive, and it led to really devastating injuries and derailed her running career. So I just think sometimes it's more powerful for people to hear the real life stories of how this impacted others.
Yeah, that's crazy. And so with this, talk about for sport in years to come, do we ever get to the point with this that some of the problems that we create are irreversible, or over time with nutrition? I know it's amazing what the human body can do and how it can adapt to things. Can we reverse these things over time?
Yeah, so most can be reversed. You can absolutely get your menstrual cycle back, if you're focusing on eating enough and eating the right foods. But again, things like bone health, if you're under fueling your body when you're in that critical bone building period, that's for life. If those bones don't build fully, there's no, I'll work on this later. Your bones are just going to be weak for the rest of your life, which then obviously they get weaker as we get older anyway, can lead to those bone injuries, which can be, really devastating.
Right. Right. And so where do we go from here? What are some recommendations you make or provide people just to make sure they're making the right choices and having a healthy relationship with food?
Yeah, so it is again very individualized, but there is hope. There is recovery from this. So I like to focus, on one thing at a time, really breaking it down. Most people hate that. They're like, no, I'm ready, I'm motivated, I want to do all the things. I'll be like, great, okay, go do all the things. And then they come back and they're like, yeah, I was so overwhelmed, I didn't do anything. I'm like, okay, let's break it down. Let's focus on one thing, 1 to 3 things I say that we can focus on today or this week. Focus on those small, realistic changes. Try and make those goals based on things you're already doing. So looking at your current habits, your current exercise activity, your current, training, your way or pattern of eating, and what can we do based on that? Rather than like starting from scratch, being like, we're going to do, something completely different than what you're already doing. And then I really like to focus on addition or abundance. What's something that I can add in? Is it a certain meal I need to focus on? Is it a certain food group? Is it that post workout? Is it hydration or sleep? It doesn't necessarily always have to be a nutrition goal because it is all really interrelated. And then seek help or support. It's okay to reach out to other people, to need help from healthcare professionals if you're just unsure of what you need to do in order to fuel your body.
Mm-hmm. And then so again, beyond the nutritional standpoint, we might also want to recommend removing exercise to a point might actually be one of those things that's pushing people over the edge, or they're doing it too aggressively, lacking recovery, not fueling for that. So do you get to the point where the recommendation is, what, for the next whatever, I want you to back off exercise as well?
Absolutely. So essentially, we're just trying to level the scale a little bit. So something's out of whack. So we either need to increase our nutrition, decrease our exercise. Maybe it's a combination of both. From a mental standpoint, it can be really hard for people to take out exercise if that's like a real, stress reliever. It's just helps with their anxiety. And so oftentimes it's mentally easier for people to increase their nutrition rather than cut out exercise. But especially based on the severity of symptoms that they're having, you might need to take out like the higher intensity exercise. You can still do some gentle movement, or you might need to take it out completely. And, there you're probably going to need to get a therapist on board to kind of help with that mental aspect as well.
Right, right. Yeah, because it sounds like something, especially as you get further along here, that definitely requires a team approach to things. There's not just one professional that this is the person you go to. It's almost this whole healthcare team to help provide the best care possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we start to wrap up here, again, I appreciate you taking the time to expand on this. This is, something that's been on my mind. I saw you do a similar webinar, longer webinar, about 60 minutes with a physical therapist in Nashville, which was awesome. I jumped on that one. And I think something that is kind of almost swept under the rug to a degree. So I want to get your insight on this. But if anyone has any questions here as we start to wrap up, please do me a favor and drop that in the chat right now, just so we can get to that in a second. But for those of you that are on here, and Jill, if you can kind of just tell us if they have questions about the chat today, if they have questions about anything and more personally they can connect you with, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can reach out on my website, jillmerkelrd.com. They can fill out an inquiry form if they are interested in one-on-one nutrition coaching. There's also an email form you can fill out, and it'll send directly to my email, or my email is on there. You can send me an email at merkel.jill@gmail.com. And then from social media standpoint, I'm most active on Instagram. So you can find me at Jill Merkel RD.
Awesome. So any questions here? Those of you that are on here, any questions? I know most are probably on a lunchtime break right now. Let's see. Okay. So Tammy asks, could my lack of nutrition as a teenager really cause the stress fractures I have had as an adult? I was a swimmer living on Doritos and Mountain Dew.
Yeah, unfortunately, it really can. And that's not to say that there's nothing you can do about it now. There's certainly benefits to, getting enough protein, getting enough calcium, vitamin D, those bone health nutrients now. but that's going to prevent further breakdown. It's not going to go back and repair what never happened when you were younger.
Okay. And so I know myself and a couple other guys on here as well. Is there anything different to consider for males versus females that just, I know it looks like the research is more heavily suited to females right now. And they're saying that we need to do more on males to see just the differences between, if there are, between male and female. But is there anything just to think about for males that are on here?
Yeah, this is one area where actually the research is more in females. Most
Mhm.
research is done in males and then just, hypothesized to be similar for females. So the main thing would be those hormones. So obviously the men don't have the menstrual cycle, so you might not, have that clear indicator like that big red flag. But low testosterone, again, not seeing the results from the workouts that you would expect, not being able to gain muscle, get stronger, get faster. That would be one of the main things that would be different for men.
Okay, great to know. And that's it in terms of questions. So perfect timing right now, right at 30 minutes. So I just
Awesome.
want to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to educate us on this topic. I appreciate all of you that have joined here on your lunch hour or whatever you're doing here Wednesday afternoon. Let's see, one more just popped out. Let me make sure it's not a question here. Yep. So that's it. Just a couple thank you. So thank you, Jill, once again. Thanks everyone for joining the Fireside Chat. I will be sending out the replay tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, but make sure, again, write down Jill's information, reach out. This is one of those areas that we just can't continue to overlook. I mean, it's so intertwined in everything we do. So make sure you just realize it's important and get the help that you need, because I mean, regardless of where we are along this, I think we all could benefit and improve our nutrition in some way. Just to get truly healthy. So Jill, once again, thank you. And everyone else, I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good one. Thanks, Jill.
Bye.